Welcome into the BlueWhite Tailgate Pawcast. Andrew Callista, Mike Rose here for this pre-Orange Bowl college football semifinal showdown against Notre Dame. We are missing the man, the myth, the legend, Frank Bodani this week. Frank already on his way to South Beach, getting ready for the sunshine. Mike, you're going to join him down there soon enough. So too will I. But we press on. We got a great show ahead. Craig Fayak, man who kicked the game winner against number one ranked Notre Dame in 1990 out at South Bend, is going to join us as a guest. Mike, Penn State, Notre Dame. I mean, I got the chills even just saying that. It's Penn State, Notre Dame, Nittany Lions, Fighting Irish. What does it mean to you?
Well, there was a long time when these programs were sort of connected to each other, I think, and they played often, but not much lately. I have only covered two Penn State Notre Dame games, and they were in, what was it, 06, 07?
06, 07.
06, 07. One of them was Charlie Weiss out at South Bend. The only time I've ever been to Notre Dame. That was very cool. My dad was a big Notre Dame fan, so just trying to give him a little bit of taste of that was cool. And then, of course, the next Notre Dame won that game pretty impressively. And then the next year, Penn State kind of returned the favor. And that was the famous time when our buddy Neil Rudell wrote a letter complaining about the press box and the heat in the press box. And Joe found out about that and was berating us and making fun of us because, the poor effete sports writers can't make the heat. That's one of the things I remember about that. Because it was
that was the first ever White House game.
Yeah, that's right.
Yet it morphed into the White House. That was the first White House game. It was electric. Jerome Hayes was chasing Jimmy Clausen around and beating him up. You know,
it was Jimmy Clausen. That's right. And they got a lot of pressure on him.
Aaron Maben coming out. You know, they had the T-shirts when Charlie Weiss got there. Wake up the Echoes. I believe 2007 was officially when the Echoes began to go to sleep under Charlie Weiss. So,
right.
This game. Where I'm from in Schuylkill County, I mean, this game meant everything. I mean, in the 80s. The upset in 1990, I remember my mom called into a bar in Monterey City and said, "Hey, I'd like to order a fizzled rocket." And it was a Notre Dame fan who owned the bar, and he's slamming the phone down. Obviously, Rocket being Rocket Ishmael, who
Rocket
injured in that game. Some great recruiting battles. Penn State won a lot of them. You know, of course, Ricky Waters and Rocket Ishmael got away from the state of Pennsylvania and went out there. But, I mean, it's two blue bloods. There's mystique. There's history. There's so many ribs. And I'll just tell, a real quick story is when I was growing up, my dad, Joe, my mom, Carol, they'd take me up and we'd go to this market, Hanrahan's Market, in the east end of town in Monterey City, Pennsylvania, which is in the heart of the coal regions. And there would be guys there, Billy Rowe, Ray and Johnny Cabanis, Marty Hanrahan, and guys. And it was always Sunday morning after church, and we were always like talking. And I'm like a young kid, and I had to like always defend the honor of Penn State. And we're talking. And Penn State was going through some rough times sometimes, but we're always talking about Penn State and Notre Dame and whoever won and things like that. We're ribbing on each other. Rudy was offsides. All Rain fans, and in the movie, you could hear the Penn State fight songs when Rudy's dad was saying, "This is the greatest sight these eyes have ever seen," the Penn State fight song.
I know. Now, why is that? Did they not know it?
They were playing the scenes. The film scenes were filmed during the 1992 Penn State game during the Snow Bowl out there.
Oh, okay.
That's why. It's all meant in love. And, love all the Notre Dame fans. Love the Notre Dame Club of Schuylkill County. They've done such great things for my family. And I'll just say right there, a couple years ago, they donated 2 tickets to the Notre Dame USC game for a raffle for my family for a fundraiser and a 2-night hotel stay. So if you could ever join the Notre Dame Club of the Schuylkill County, for people who listen up there, I would recommend doing it. Great people run it. The McCarroll family, great people playing their golf tournament. Love the Notre Dame Club of Schuylkill County. And also, one of my Notre Dame friends actually said to me, "It's Catholics versus convicts in the Orange Bowl. Part 2.
Yeah.
I laughed, but he said that. Catholics versus convicts, part 2. Give it a hat for that one. So
Okay.
that's the rivalry. I mean, it's all in good banter. And even my science teacher in middle school in the 87 game, the coldest game ever at Beaver Stadium, took the West End Fire Company gear and went up to Beaver Stadium and snuck in and led the Notre Dame team onto the field. His name was Eggy Killian. Don't track him down.
Beef up security, I guess, is the lesson there.
Yeah. Beef up security. Great. I love the Notre Dame fans. Awesome. This game is awesome for college football. It means the world. All right. So that's up. Let's talk a little bit about Boise State. Let's talk Boise State. Penn State, victorious. Abdul Carter, encouraging what James Franklin said yesterday. I would hope because, I mean, Abdul's posting to social media and things like that. And James Franklin said, hey, it's going to come down. It's too early to tell, but it's going to come down to like how he can play. And I
thought it was very strange that James said, I can't see any reason why he wouldn't play. I thought that was strange that he said that. James always says, you guys know I don't like to talk about injuries, but then he kind of talks about injuries. And really, it made it sound like at least the injury is not going to be like the doctors are going to say, no way you can play in this game. That's what it sounds like. We'll find out. You can't overreact and overparse every single thing these coaches say because they say millions of things. They're constantly under the gun in that way. But I would say I would expect him to play if I had to bet one way or the other. I'd say I expect him to play.
Yeah, I mean that's what I was as I was sitting in the press conference yesterday. I mean that was my initial thought with everything James Franklin said. Penn State's running game. I mean, let's go right to handing out Lions roar. No unsung heroes. There are no unsung heroes because everything that you saw in that football game was wide out in the open. But I mean, Lions roar for me. Penn State's offensive line, specifically Nolan Rucci and Cooper Cousins, just plowing the way. Cooper Cousins taking out 3 guys on a big third and short play for Katron Allen.
And really well blocked, yeah.
I mean, really well blocked. And Nolan Rucci with what he's been able to do on that, crease play that Nick Singleton took to the house. Nolan Rucci getting a great kick out, and what he's been able to do on a couple of times, just plowing guys down the field, 5-7 yards down the field, getting combo blocks. Nolan Rucci gets my Lions roar for the victory over Boise State.
I'm going to go with Amin Vanover. I thought he had a really good game. He's really good at setting that edge, and you knew it wasn't going to be one guy to deal with Ashton Jeanty. You knew it was going to be a group effort, but corralling him. I asked a question of James immediately after the game in the press conference, and I said, how were you able to kind of corral Jeanty? And James said, what do you mean kind of? We corralled him. We really corralled him, and they did. They reined him in from the very first time he touched it. He had a 26-yard run that was a great run, but, what they had to avoid was the 60 and 70-yard explosion that sets up points, and they completely avoided that. They did a great job with him.
Yeah, and to me, it wasn't just Amin Vanover, once Abdul Carter went out. I mean, Denai Dennis Sutton, I don't know what you thought. I thought he was phenomenal. He did have, and I'm not going to call it cheap or dirty, but that was an extremely late hit on Jeanty. And it would have been a flag even if it wasn't late because it was a blindside block. Some people, I don't know if emotions kind of took over, heat of the moment type of thing. I guess maybe you could call it cheap. I don't think he was trying to hurt him, but that the second penalty, the roughing the passer, was a little high, but it wasn't late. So,
and also in Carter's absence, Max Glanville a little bit.
Yes.
A true freshman, a kid, not only a true freshman, but a kid who reclassified, really ought to be a senior in high school right now. And he's out there with the game on the line. It's obvious that they were going to move Carter around from the outset a little more than they have in some past games. A lot of games after they make the adjustments at halftime, they did that. Well, here they did it a little bit from the jump. And then when it had to be Glanville, he kind of did a lot of those same things. in terms of moving him around. So, I mean, that really was an 11-person effort, but there were a couple of keys to it. And they really did a nice job. But as a result, I think they probably didn't pass block and defend the pass quite as well because you're giving something up. You're giving something up in order to get something. But yeah, they, as far as dealing with him, they did a great job.
What do you make of everybody on social media? And we've talked about Andy Kotelnicki being maybe too cute or trying to do too many things and going too deep into the bag of tricks. I don't think there were too many bag of tricks, except for the one where Tyler Warren came on third, and I think it was like third and manageable, but not exactly third and short, where he came under motion, and then it was a pitch back to Drew Allar, and then he was looking for Warren on the throwback around the tight end. That was maybe the only cute one for me. But there were times in the game where Penn State offense sputtered, and social media and the fan base was alight, including myself, sitting in my living room asking, why are you not just running the football when you're averaging 4 yards a pop? Because you knew eventually a big one was going to pop, and multiple big ones popped.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it was just they got a little bit away from the run. I thought that one 3rd and 1 when you're on like your own 31 or something like that, or wherever they were. I mean, they weren't really in the middle of the field, but they weren't really pinned deep at that point either. And it looked like if they could put a drive together at that point, I believe that was early 4th quarter, whenever it was.
Yeah.
Excuse me. I think they really could have started burying them a little earlier than they did if they'd have put a big drive together. And that was a weird call. But you know what? I mean, we don't know what he's looking at. We don't know what he's looking at from Boise's defense in addition to his own playbook. And he has sort of admitted, Kotelnicki, I mean, he has sort of admitted that he walks a fine line with this stuff. We have this stuff in. We want to use it. We want to fool people a little bit. We want to maybe, if not fool them, at least put them under stress constantly. So it is kind of a fine line sometimes as far as how deep you need to go or want to go in the playbook.
How would you grade Drew Allar's performance in this game? Because on a couple throws, I mean, you're thinking these are top 10 draft pick throws. I mean,
my goodness, yeah.
These are top of the line. And then there's a couple on reads. It's like, that's the wrong read. One of them led to a fumble. Why did Drew keep this ball? It should have been handed off. Drew ran into a sack right here. This ball should have been dumped off. It kind of was a Jekyll and Hyde performance. It was perfection on one end, and then you're left scratching your head on the other side. So how would you personally grade Drew Allar's performance? Again,
well, the first 2 touchdown passes were the ones that you were referencing there were just tremendous throws. And because they got turned into touchdowns, which means Tyler Warren has to make a play and come down with it, and Amari Evans has to make a play and get behind the defense and come down with it. Because they turned into points, that's what people will remember. I thought after that he just played okay. I would probably give him a B if I was grading just him individually. It's such a problem for Penn State to get their wide receivers fully involved. I keep waiting for somebody to have like a 10-catch game or a 7, 8, 10-catch game. That just doesn't happen. And James was stating his case the other day for I'd like to see some stories about the spectacular turnaround of the wide receiver group. Well, there hasn't been one. I mean, they've gotten better, but there hasn't been that's still the thing that holds them back a little bit. And man, they're in the Final Four of the whole country right now, and they're going to 3 other brand names. So what they've done is impressive by itself. I mean, the fact that they're here, but for them to become a truly great team, and boy, when they scored those touchdowns early, it felt like they were headed toward it. It felt, James said after the game, we were on fire there for a little while, and then we just made too many mistakes, and the fire we kind of put it out ourselves. Let's not give Allar a B, let's say.
Yeah, and James is 100% right. Penn State did put the fire out themselves because the play that Kobe King made to force the fumble, and then Zaki Weekly, I mean, that was one of the best plays I've seen in a long time.
Yeah,
that is, to be honest with you, the play Ohio State made on defense against Penn State to turn away Penn State at the end of the first half.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
With 3. I mean, it's pretty much the same thing. The ball's in Boise State's hand, and all of a sudden it's in Penn State hands.
And then 2 plays later, they fumbled. 2 plays later, they fumbled, and really an unforced error. They just messed up So, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. There were times when it felt like Penn State really could have buried them. On the other hand, if you're a Boise State fan, you're thinking, well, we made more mistakes than you did. I mean, they had 13 penalties. They had 4 turnovers. That's a little deceptive. I mean, one of the turnovers was on 3rd and 25, so it was almost like a punt. The other one was kind of a Hail Mary near the end. So,
2 missed kicks Boise State had. And this is the one caution for Penn State. And, the Penn State did get away with an offensive pass interference. I do want to point that out since I'm critical of the refs when on a Penn State loss. Omari Evans did get away with an offensive pass interference. That should have been called. That was a shove in the back. So I just want to point that out. I also do want to point out what James is saying about articles and things like that. James needs to listen to the BlueWhite Tailgate Pawcast because all season long we have been talking about Harrison Wallace III's development. And we've said he's been coming a long way, and Penn State needs to trust him more. We've also said Omari Evans should have been the number 2 wide receiver and got more reps. And we've said it's been a rep thing all year long. And James even basically came out and said he had to learn everything. It was a rep thing and needed to have time out there, on the field and be able to, run his routes and learn the position. And he has gotten better all season long. He's just needed time to develop.
I don't see his ball skills being a problem. I mean, I don't see him dropping a lot of balls. So maybe it is the route running. And as they've said, as Franklin said, and Drew Allar said this week, Evans has a superpower, which is that he is fast, even for guys on the outside in big time college football. He can get behind the defense, and we have seen that. And we've had gigantic plays being made by him because of that superpower, as they say.
Yeah, and early in the season, Penn State rotated wide receivers, and they had 3 wide receivers at one point have 100-yard games. Well, a little less rotation, maybe it's Omari Evans that strung together a couple 100 yards, and Harrison Wallace at there, and then a confidence level goes. And that was, they talked about, it clicking in the room and finding things. And I do believe it's finally starting to do that. So
maybe you're right. And certainly Wallace and Evans are the 2 guys that have got to do it. I mean, it seems, I don't want to rip anybody, but it seems sort of amazing that Liam Clifford had a 100-yard game because I don't think he's had 100 yards combined the rest of the season, but it seems like it. But anyway, Evans and Wallace are the guys there. And if they can get a little piece of that against what is a very good Notre Dame secondary, if they could get just a little bit of that, again, I'm just going to Tyler Warren. I mean, he is such an X factor, even against good defenses, because he's such a matchup problem, and they utilize him in so many unusual ways.
Gotcha. Well, enough about Boise State. It's Penn State, Notre Dame. Let's move on because it's in the fall. A lot of reasons to be optimistic coming out of that Boise State game, but yet some reason to have a little bit of pause coming into this game and saying Penn State needs to be a little bit sharper going up against the Fighting Irish because they are a much better team. And they are. I mean, this harkens back. This game harkens back to what the 12-year war was all about between Penn State and Notre Dame. I mean, for young people that are listening to this podcast, I mean, Notre Dame was the standard in the 70s. They were the Alabama. I mean, am I right, Mike? I wasn't alive for the.
Well, yeah, I would say that's right. Now I believe they only won 1 natty in the 70s. Would you have 77? And I can remember that team, and I remember, but they lost early. They had a regular season loss. I think it was Ole Miss. Somebody beat them early. Anyway, but yeah, they were. I mean, Notre Dame was really special, and then at the end of the 70s, if I have my chronology correct, they got their own. They started talking about their own TV network, and at the time, everybody thought well, this is the end of any sort of parity in college football because they have their own TV network. They're going to destroy everybody in recruiting nationally. That will be such a vehicle for them nationally. And of course, it didn't happen, but Notre Dame is still not in a conference and they still have their own TV deal. So it looks like Marcus Freeman is the guy who's a pretty good fit for this era, recruiting in this era, structuring a program, motivating young kids. So Notre Dame, it looks to me like they're in pretty good shape going forward. They're back.
I'm so glad Brian Kelly is not at Notre Dame. For Notre Dame fans.
Not a beloved figure.
No. No. Can I make another joke? He's the Barabbas. They released them without any good for the community. That's Brian Kelly.
That's Brian Kelly.
That's what it is. And good for Notre Dame. It's the best thing that's happened for Notre Dame in a long time, allowing him to walk out the door. Went for greener pastures. Where's LSU right now? But I mean, you look at this series, Penn State 8-4, since the 12-year series kind of started in the 80s. They won in 81, their first trip out to South Bend, the only team to ever do that. They won in 82 on the way to national championship game, won in 83, won in 85, won in 86, won in 87, won in 90, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, won in 91. Notre Dame won in 84, 88, 89, and 92. 88, Notre Dame won the national championship. And I mean, you think about it, 82, 85, 86 was Penn State number one claim for a national championship. Yeah. Notre Dame won it in 88, and they were ranked number one in 89, 90, 87, and 90 as well.
You think about how things have changed. I mean, you're talking about that stretch there in the 80s, and both of these teams were pure independents. And as I remember it, correct me if I'm wrong, but this game was usually played in November. So it's a really big game late in the season. It's not like we beat a top 5 team, but it was on September 2nd and they ended up going 8-4 and we're out of the top 25. Or, it's not like that. These were really epic matchups. And, these teams have always been sort of connected. I think they're not in the South. So much of college football is in the Sun Belt. These are two that are not in the Sun Belt. It's sort of special.
If you're going to talk about the history of Penn State, Notre Dame, you got to talk about some of those historical games. Maybe the most historical game is the 1990 upset that Penn State pulled off in South Bend of the number 1 ranked Fighting Irish. The man who did that, Craig Fayak, and he joins us here on the BlueWhite Tailgate Pawcast. Craig, thanks a lot for joining us.
Of course, great to be here, guys.
First off, Craig, can you tell us what you're up to right now?
Yeah, I work for a company named Accenture, one of the world's largest management consulting firms. Been doing that for the past, 15 years or so, 20 years, and really enjoy it.
Is that the Accenture of the Accenture World Match Play?
It is. Back in the day, we used to sponsor them, and we work with some of the world's largest companies, and I help work do big scale transformations. So work a lot with teams. So coming back from my football background, really learning how to bring teams together and make change work.
Greg, when we watch football now, the last couple of years at a high level, college and pro, one of the most amazing things is how good the kickers are. Are you sort of amazed at that too? I mean, having been through it, yeah.
Yeah, I am. It's on two aspects of it. One is just distance wise. What was a 52-yard field goal when I played was probably a 57-yard field goal. Now I feel like they're about 4 to 5 yards further, than they used to be. Certainly when I played, and then just consistency wise, these guys just don't miss. They're just so accurate, and it really is impressive how great they are.
What's your explanation for that?
I just think it's partially just it's nutrition and strength. I think some of it is just like anything else, having the tools and experiences of just what works, what doesn't in terms of technique, and just getting really consistent. And with being able to be coached at broad levels, and a lot of knowledge out there versus it being kept with pockets of people. Everyone's getting better at it, right? It's just proliferating, and everyone's getting better at it. So it's fun to watch for sure.
And you would be an excellent guy to talk about, having made a game winner as, I think, a freshman, correctly? Is that correct? Against Notre Dame? About when you go on the field for a game winner, and how do you sort of stay out of your own way and not let the moment overwhelm you in that situation?
Yeah, that's the biggest trick. And as a freshman, when in high school I played lots of positions, quarterback and defense, and I never left the field. And so you get into a rhythm. You get the first hit out of the way. When you're a kicker, you never get the first hit. It's always the first hit all the time. And so how do I had to learn how, especially as a freshman, how to control my emotions, my body, my adrenaline. Because if you get too much rush of adrenaline, that can really throw you off whenever, as a kicker, like a golfer, just a fraction of an inch could throw you off. And so just learning how to keep your body in check and knowing what the sweet spot is was something I just had to learn. Fortunately, by the time we got to Notre Dame later in the year, had a pretty good sense of what that was, although I'll be perfectly honest, wasn't ready for that type of adrenaline to hit that much. I mean, that was a very different kind of situation. So as much as I was preparing for the year and much as I had some experience dealing with it, it really was quite a different experience kind of getting ready to hit that kick.
Can you take us back into that moment? Because, Notre Dame's up 21-7 in the second half. What was the sideline vibe like? They're ranked number 1 in the country. I know Coach Paterno, he had the student newspaper and the South Bend paper delivered to his home all season long, ever since the Penn State Notre Dame rivalry kind of took off in the early 80s and things like that, so he could study his opponent. But just what was the vibe like on the sidelines?
Well, going into the game, I remember we were really hot at that point. We had won 7 straight games after we dropped the first 2 against Texas and USC, close games. So we knew we had the talent to play with Notre Dame. They were loaded, of course, with the Rocket Ismail and Todd Light, and Jerome Bettis was on that team. Ricky Water. They were loaded, but we knew we had talent as well to go out there and we could beat these guys. And so as the game got started, we fell behind, but there was just this sense, there was a calm sense, I think, that, hey, look, if we just stick to our plan, we didn't play very well. If we could just stick to our plan and score some points here, and we knew our defense was gonna hold up. We had a chance to win. So there's no panic. It was just a matter of going out there and doing our jobs. And of course, we had 3 huge plays during that game. Tony Sacco with the big pass to Terry Smith. Of course, Terry playing a big role this weekend, or this Thursday night. The next one, Rick Sales for a touchdown. Of course, Al Golden catching the big catch to tie up the game. So we knew we had the players to do it. It's just a matter of just sort of staying calm and getting out there and executing.
You mentioned Al Golden's catch. I remember that as a kid. Now, I'm 4 years old at the time, and I'm remembering in the offseason, and I always remember Al Golden's wide open. He's wide open. I go back and I rewatched the game this week. He wasn't that wide open. He was open, but it wasn't like I remember it. Do you remember the reaction on the sidelines when it happened, and do you remember watching the play?
I do remember watching it. Everyone was obviously ecstatic. Tony rolled out to the right, threw a throwback, and Al was just very clutch. And he was just, he's such a great leader. And it wasn't surprising that, he made the catch and plowed his way into the end zone. Everyone was just, ecstatic and going crazy. Of course, I need to calm down because I've got to go and kick the extra point to tie the game. So I really can't get caught up in the emotions. I do remember it happening and just being, hey, let's get out there and tie the game. But, but having Al, Al was just such a great leader. Al was one of those guys. Even if it was the early in the year, every time I made a field goal, he was always so excited for me. He was always the first one to congratulate me. He was always the first one to sort of help build me up as a freshman. And so that's, just speaks to the kind of leadership, he brought to the team then. And of course, not surprising that he's doing what he's doing now.
Well, that was going to be my next question, Craig. You have 2 guys on that team who were really looked like compelling leaders as coaches, even though they're not right now head coaches in Golden and Terry Smith. Did you see that coming with either or both of them?
Well, you just knew both were just just natural leaders. I mean, so that you just gravitate. So again, not surprised, with either of them, just, considering just what kind of leaders they were. And of course they were great athletes too. I mean, they just contributed, and they won us many games. And so not surprised at all to see them do so well in the coaching ranks.
Darren Perry, he was another one. I mean, he had the big interception to set up your game-winning field goal, but he went into the coaching ranks in the NFL with the Packers. Was he with for a while?
Darren was another guy, again, another tremendous leader playing that hero position. Again, not surprised. He just always seemed to be in the right place at the right time, and so of course making the interception. He was doing his job playing back there, and then did a great job of just getting the ball upfield to keep making a nice short kick for me.
Now, be honest. You're a freshman. Touchdown Jesus is out there. He makes the interception. It's cold out. Are you sweating when he made the interception, knowing it's coming down to your right foot?
Yeah, perfectly honest with you. I mean, the adrenaline that just hit me was overwhelming. It hit right away. So thank goodness we had a few minutes of actual time between the kick, and was able to get my thoughts together, because there is a moment when you just realize it's coming down to you. I told the story once where I remember one of the first things I remember saying, if I ran out of this stadium right now, would anyone notice? Like, could I leave right now and would anyone really notice? I think they would. It flashed through my mind for a second. And then you start to say, okay, look, the next, few minutes is going to be pretty important. And we just got to get our minds ready to get out there and do my job. Now, what's interesting is when I went onto the field after the timeouts, I was really calm at that point, because it's all muscle memory. Right now, it's all just what you practiced and the repetition. I know it sounds kind of boring and sounds basic, that says, practice, if you just practice and just continue to build muscle memory, that's what it's all about. But it really, really was. And so I still remember the blackness behind the goalpost. I still remember the little clump of grass. I still remember feeling very locked in. Athletes talk about that zone. They talk about things slowing up. They talk about the hyper focus, and I can say it's true. That was that one moment where everything just seemed to slow up, and there was not a doubt. Truly, there was not a doubt that I was gonna hit it well. And fortunately, Bob Check, great snap. I mean, Bob was a former equipment manager, the great story there of how he came about and was out there. Bill Spohr, of course, good friend, and was a great holder, very calming personality, very calming kind of guy for a freshman. Hit me on the leg and said, let's go. And that was it. We just were on autopilot. And, fortunately, I hit a good kick, and the rest is history.
Greg, two things for one of the football lettermen. What do you think of the way James Franklin has managed this program and build it and where they are right now? And has the general perception that you see of your fellow lettermen, has it changed in terms of acceptance of Franklin and hey, we're all on board, we're all pulling the rope in the same direction, or whatever cliche you want to use?
Yeah, I think so. When I get asked the question, I always boil down to a couple things. That first of all, we still graduate our players. Secondly, our players are still tremendous representatives in our community and do really, really good things. And third, by the way, they win games. So by any measure, right, they're doing a great job. Now, Coach Franklin, does it in a different way, it's a different style than certainly Coach Paterno did. But the outcomes are still the same, and you can tell the players love him. The players' families love him. And so, from my perspective, he's doing a great job. And from a letterman's perspective, I mean, you'll see the letterman's support for him and for this program is off the charts, and I think we'll certainly continue to be.
Great.
Greg, just go back to the kick one more time. Can you take us through kind of the operation? Just because I don't think a lot of people know that the long snapper on that play started the year handing out towels and blowing whistles and organizing practice. And because of injuries and guys dropping, raised his hand and was like, I could snap the ball. The thing around Coach Paterno, was, well, I don't trust freshmen. And you have two freshmen and a former equipment manager in the most important play to upset the number one ranked team in the country.
Yeah, you had so Bill Spohr was our holder. He wasn't a freshman. I don't know if he was a junior, but he was a walk on. He was a walk on. That was the story with Bill was the walk on. I was a freshman. Bob Check was the former equipment manager. Right, that was who was lining up to sort of have a chance at knocking off the number one team in the nation. And, Bob Check did start off the season as equipment manager. He played high school football, but, he was an equipment manager. And again, we needed a snapper. And I remember it was the second game of the year against Southern Cal. He had a blue jersey in his locker and he was or wasn't against Southern Cal. I guess it was a couple games later. But regardless, he said, I can snap. And he did. And he was really, really good at it. And it's one of those things that in college football nowadays, I'm not sure how much that'll happen. I hope it does. In today's day and age, it seems a little different when you get these stories of literally someone who's an equipment manager is now on the field, playing a big game. Was a really, really cool story. And as I said, having, Bill Spohr there was just such a calming factor, and he was just so sure-handed and he was great, and it made it a lot easier for me.
Oh, yeah. How close are you following this team, this current team? And do you have any sense of what might happen on Thursday?
You know what? I have been watching this team. We watch them all the time. I have a 13-year-old son. My 13-year-old son, Eli, plays football, and we're really into it. And I'm really excited for the game. I like the matchup. I think we match up well against them. I know it sounds boring and cliche, but it really is going to boil down to who makes the least mistakes and who can make that one big play in the clutch when it counts. I don't think it's going to be a blowout on either side. I like our chances. I really do. And I think we've got, Notre Dame obviously believes in themselves. We believe as well. I think we're feeling there could be some magic here in this run. So again, I like our chances.
As a consulting guy and, somebody who's played at the highest level at Penn State, if you had to look at this Penn State team from a distance, is there one intangible that you see from this Nittany Lion football team that you could point at and say, in the clutch, this is what I like about this team, and this is what I think could get them over the hump to the national championship game?
Yeah, there's two things. One is you've got a defense that's really opportunistic right now, and they believe, right? So they believe they're going to make a turnover, and you saw with Dom DeLuca and making an interception, and against SMU, that first one, for example, they just believe now that good things are going to happen, and that belief is really, really important. And you can almost, Coach Paterno used to say it, you can almost will yourself to win. You can almost will yourself to make things happen. I think the defense does that. Secondly, on offense, what I like is, while we're leading on the run game, we know we've got, a guy number 44, Tyler Warren, obviously, that believes as well. And you just know that in a clutch, you give him a chance, he's going to make a play. Even if he's covered, he's going to make a play. And so on both sides of the ball, I really like the belief that we have. And I think that'll certainly help us on Thursday.
I like it.
What if Tyler Warren catches a pass and Coach Golden is down by the 25-yard line and goes up, and because you should know, of all people, you can't cover Penn State tight ends.
No, that's right. The worlds will collide. It'll just blow people's mind, I think, at that point, if that ever happened.
I like it. I like it. I like that.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate you being a guest on the BlueWhite Tailgate Pawcast. Definitely having you on in the future as we go through this and future Penn State football seasons.
Good stuff. All right, guys. Good talking
man.
with you.
Appreciate
You
it.
got it. Okay.
Once again, I want to give a big thank you to Craig Fayak for stopping by the BlueWhite Tailgate Podcast. Penn State, Notre Dame. Mike, this is good versus good. Let's get right into it. Is this the best offense Notre Dame's faced? Because their defense is legit, but is this going to be the best offense the Fighting Irish have faced all season long?
Well, I'm not sure that Penn State's offense is better than USC's offense. Some people might consider that blasphemy, but I think USC, although they are kind of dysfunctional, they did get a good win over in their bowl game against Texas A&M. But I don't know. I think Notre Dame is good on defense on all three levels, and I think their secondary is really outstanding. And it's a bunch of kind of big dudes, long guys, 6'1", 6'2" type D-backs, which you don't see often. So I think Penn State will have a hard time pushing down the ball down the field vertically in the passing game. I believe we've mentioned that once or twice on this show over the course of the season. I think that problem is a real problem against an opponent of this quality. I think both teams kind of have the same limitations on offense. I think in Penn State's case, it's more because of the wideouts. In Notre Dame's case, it's more because Riley Leonard is not really a classic, stand in the pocket and pick you apart type guy.
You talk about pushing the ball down the field. Drew Allar spoke about that at Penn State's Orange Bowl Media Day this past weekend. Here's Drew Allar, Penn State's non-portal quarterback, talking about throwing the ball vertical.
Notre Dame in particular does a great job of, making everything contested catches. Like you said, there's not many, just open field or open throws downfield. And I think, one thing that's different about their DB room in general is they're a pretty tall DB room and lengthy in terms of their arm size. I don't think they have a DB shorter than 6 foot, which is really not common, I think, in college football in general. And they're a physical group. Obviously, they're not overly physical group because I don't think they have many penalties on the year. So they're very smart and disciplined with, how they play press man. And
Drew Allar talking about the Notre Dame secondary. And he's right. I mean, these guys are ball hawks. They're clean. They fly around. They fly to the ball. They're senior-led guys on the back end. They got a 2-time All-American in Xavier Watts. Aiden Schuler's back there. Jordan Clark, who's ESPN analyst Ryan Clark, who portaled in this year for the Irish. Notre Dame loaded. I think they have more former sons of NFL players on this team than any other team in Division I college football. And the secondary is good. I talked to one diehard Notre Dame fan. He's like, they're solid. You just wait for the one coverage that they'll blow, and then that's it. It's going to be one a game, and then it's done. Against Georgia, the Bulldogs dropped it. But he said that it's going to be one, and you better capitalize on it because you only get one against these guys.
Well, two things about the way they play. They and again, this is another area where I think they're pretty similar to Penn State, except maybe more so. I think they play press man-to-man even more than Penn State does. Maybe as much as Penn State did last year, where they really featured it. And a couple of things. Number one, I was on that Allar interview, and one of the things he said is you don't get easy access throws against them. They're all contested. But the other thing, when you're playing press man coverage, is a lot of times the routes will clear out and you'll have space. That's where Drew Allar has done a lot of his running very effectively to move the chains and in those kind of situations against man coverage where the guys are, the defense is kind of turning their head and looking at the receivers. So, I mean, that might be something to look at. And the other thing to look at is Tyler Ward and what are they going to do with him? And some people have said that Watts, the safety, might sort of just follow him around maybe or something like that. I don't know if you want to occupy a safety with that responsibility, that would seem to create some other problems maybe on the back end. But yeah, that's the interesting piece of it. Yeah.
Just the defense as a whole led the nation in turnovers created and points off of those turnovers, 31 created turnovers. That, very, very high. They play that defense that kind of Penn State fans are familiar with, that bend but don't break type of format, and they're very good at it. Howard Cross, his dad was pretty good in the NFL. They're banged up. Following some of the Notre Dame guys on social media, he was carrying the Sugar Bowl trophy off the field at the end of the game. So the reading between the lines for their social media guys that cover the team was, if he's carrying a big, heavy trophy off the Sugar Bowl field, he's probably going to be able to go in the Orange Bowl. So, when you look at it, their linebackers fly all over the field. Very similar to Penn State. Would you not agree?
Yeah, I think their back seven might be a little better than Penn State's. I think Penn State's front four is as good as anybody's. And I mean, you actually have 5 or 6 guys. And of course, Carter is going to be a big part of that story, his availability. You have 5 or 6 guys that are sort of manning that front four on rotating in and out. But yeah, their linebackers really impressed me in the Georgia game. I thought they were really good. And the other thing is how can Penn State, I think Penn State can run the ball. I think the way things have been going lately, I think they're going to be able to run the ball. Can Warren be a wild card factor? Can they push it down the field to Wallace and Evans once in a while? I mean, that's a big part of it. I kind of, when I look at a team and they're really reliant for big plays, for points almost, they're reliant on creating turnovers and they're reliant on special teams. And Notre Dame kind of is. To get big explosives. They're not getting them as much from their offense. when I look at that, I think, well, okay, Penn State, if Penn State can play a relatively mistake-free game because they don't turn it over much. Drew Allar, God knows, Drew Allar doesn't turn it over much. I think that's a way into a scenario for Penn State having some success here.
Terry Smith knows Al Golden very well.
You would think.
If Notre Dame is playing the bend but don't break defense, and Al Golden learned from Joe Paterno, learned from Scrap Bradley, things like that, are there similarities that Terry Smith could give a little bit of insightful points of this is what Al Golden's going to be thinking in certain situations, kind of a mind inside the opponent?
Well, maybe, but this is my sense of Al Golden. Al Golden was a really good football coach, a really smart guy who became a great defensive coordinator because of what he learned in the NFL, because he's bringing a lot of stuff to what Notre Dame's doing a lot of stuff on defense, coverages and blitzes, mixing it up, doing a lot of different things. So he might be, even though he's got the roots and there's a commonality there, he might be operating at a more complicated level than anything that Terry Smith could pull out of the past. But hey, in terms of just basic tendencies, maybe, sure.
I got you. So Riley Leonard, I follow Landon Tegwell on Twitter, former Penn State offensive line. Does a great job. Really fun. Really fun to
media guy. Yeah.
Really fun to engage with. He's going to have a great career in media. I saw him compare Riley Leonard to Luke Altmaier as people were comparing this guy to Kevin Jennings. And I was thinking about this, and I like the Luke Altmaier comparison, but I also think Riley Leonard is a little more dangerous than Altmaier with the legs. I like a Garrett Green comparison from West Virginia better.
Yeah.
He's a little better. He's a little better passer and bigger, but he's very effective with his legs when he uses it. Case in point, the Sugar Bowl. This kid will leave everything on the line. He portaled in from Duke. His last game of the season, Notre Dame beat him up. They broke his ankle, and now he's the Notre Dame quarterback.
Yeah, how about that?
I mean, you talk about things coming full circle. He's leading the Irish. He's doing a great job. He's gutsy. He's everything you want in a quarterback. How does Penn State's defense go about attacking him? Do they change anything that they've done? Because they've gone up against Kevin Jennings, who I don't think was the Kevin Jennings the real Kevin Jennings, I don't think showed up in Beaver Stadium with the weather.
No.
Does Penn State change anything that they've done all season long to attack Riley Leonard and the Notre Dame offense?
Well, I think maybe blitz a little bit less than usual, and maybe more spy and contain with him. Try to keep him in the pocket, because I think he's pretty ordinary if he just has to beat you out of the pocket. So maybe it was, and maybe that's kind of what they did with SMU too. Come to think of it, I think that's kind of what they did in that game too. So maybe it'll be similar to that approach. Now this kid he's a veteran guy now. I think he's a smart guy. There's no doubt that his teammates see him as their leader. That's very evident in all the body language that you see. And he's a good athlete. He's a really good athlete. He's a tall kid. He looks a little bit gangly, but man, he's not. He's really athletic, and he's dangerous in that way. So maybe we'll see a little bit more sag and contain zone coverage, fill his field of vision with blue jerseys. I don't even know what jerseys they're wearing in that Orange Bowl, but you know what I'm saying. I think that maybe that's the way that it will go off the normal script a little bit for Penn State.
He has over 800 yards rushing, I believe, on the season was the number. I think 860 some. So I mean, he's got to be one of those college athletes you just love to cover. I've never covered him, but from everything that I've read, people just love talking to him.
He's like a nice kid. Yeah, he seems like a nice, really outgoing type dude. Yeah,
absolutely. Notre Dame's running back Jeremiah Love injured again, following Notre Dame beat guys and things that they're putting out. I believe the inclination is they
think he's going to play. Yeah, I got that impression too. They are a little beat up. There's some question marks. Yeah. That's one of them. I think they're a little bit more beat up than Penn State is in terms of key positions, but that's really one of those where we're not going to know until right before the game where these guys are available.
And I'm fine with this. I know we're in the era of the injury reports and the availability. And coming from somebody who made a massive mistake on that front, a while ago in their career, 5 years ago, I'm absolutely fine with it. For the
it's okay, and I think it was it the SMU game that Penn State did an availability report?
Yeah.
And then they realized that they didn't have to anymore because that was a Big Ten requirement, not a college football playoff requirement. So, well, if the other guy's going to do it, we're not going to do it either. It's kind of like how James used to do a depth chart, and then Harbaugh quit doing it, and then he started looking around and other teams weren't doing it. I'm not doing it either. So it's kind of like that. And I think Penn State is relatively healthy, although obviously Carter is a big question. And again, like you said, I mean, that we won't know until the game starts.
Tip of the hat to Penn State's strength and conditioning program. We've talked to Dwight Gaunt about that, and we asked Nick Singleton about it post game after the Maryland game, and coaching staff's doing a great job on keeping those guys.
It really becomes critical now. This is their 16th game. It's only is it Notre Dame's 15th game? I think it's only Notre Dame's 15th game because they didn't have a conference championship game. But anyway, on the other hand, Penn State has 2 extra days to prepare because they pushed Notre Dame's previous game back a day.
Penn State has such a days,
yeah,
3 days less, yeah.
I don't know if that's a big deal or not, but
I think any little advantage Penn State any little advantage the team has at this point when you're stretching a season out. I texted somebody the other day who covers college football. I said the season's too long. It's too long. I mean, you're getting the national championship down into January 20th. The whole first semester, the add drop date for the second semester is already gone.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And they could tweak a lot of things here. And maybe you lose a little bit of revenue by tweaking them, but it's sort of a good faith thing that to show that you are interested in the long-term interest of the sport. I think shortening the season would be one of them. And of course, James wants to get rid of the conference championship games altogether. Of course, if you went back to an 18 playoff, which don't get me started, but if you go back to an 18 playoff, then you could keep the conference championship games, and they would be very meaningful games. They would almost be like playoff games. So, I think most of the issues that people have with the structure of these things would go away if you went to 8 teams.
I talked to Frank a little bit, and just 2 more topics before we get into picking this football game. Penn State, Notre Dame on the BlueWhite Tailgate Pawcast. Drew Allar, is he the X factor for Penn State to win this game? Because we've talked about and we know the run game travels, and the run game has been excellent for Penn State.
Yep.
But they're playing a different animal. It's going to be tougher for the run game to be the run game that we've seen the last 3 games for 4 games for Penn State. So, and Notre Dame's going to try their darndest to stop it. And their guys in the secondary are going to be up to stop it. And they could. So is Drew Allar, does Penn State have to have the Drew Allar on the 2 touchdown throws and not the Drew Allar of the 2 of the second and third quarter against Boise State to win this game against Notre Dame?
Well, I think they probably do. We've talked about this all year. They're in the national semifinals, but realistically, it's possible that their best win was Illinois. It's sort of amazing that they've gotten to this point, even though it's a real accomplishment to get to this point. And even though we've written and said over and over and over, winning the games you're supposed to win very, very consistently is not easy to do. And they have definitely done that. But to get to the next level, to win these last 2 games, I think you've got to have the high end of what Drew Allar is capable of more consistently over the course of the game. You don't necessarily need to see we're not going to see 10 throws like those early touchdown throws. We're not going to see that, but that plus throwing it over the middle, getting the wide receivers involved, moving the chains of the passing game, making them pay for bringing people into the box, which is what you're talking about. I think that's fair.
That is what the game comes down to me. And if Drew Allar can make 5 to 6 more throws, Penn State will win.
And fewer bad ones, and fewer bad decisions, and fewer bad throws. Yeah. I mean, just the best version of what I'm certain he's capable of. I think Penn State can win. I think Penn State can win the game if they do that.
One topic we didn't talk about. I pushed it off to the end. No particular reason I did that. I was just down at the end of my notes. Marcus Freeman, who I think is a great fit at Notre Dame. I think maybe he got hired 1 or 2 years before he was fully ready to be the head coach at Notre Dame.
Yep.
But that's the way that happens. I think James Franklin probably got the job at Penn State 1 or 2 years before he was fully ready to be a head coach at Penn State. It's not the first time that's ever happened. Steve Sarkisian had the same thing happen out at USC. Got the job before he was ready. Lane Kiffin. Yeah. It happens.
Guys like that. Yeah.
Always got to get the hot coaching prospect, and a lot of guys aren't ready. The great schools will allow those coaches to mature and build into their program. Notre Dame is one of those schools. It's paid off with Marcus Freeman. It's paid off with Penn State and James Franklin. We have 2 Black head coaches. One of them is moving on to the national championship game. Our good friend Rich Scarcella asked James Franklin about that. Mike, you heard his answer. What does this game mean for the future of Black head coaches in Power 4? And I consider, obviously, Notre Dame is a Power 4 level team.
Sure.
Power 4 level conferences.
Well, as James said when he was asked about it the other day, which you're referencing, he said back when they had the 2 African American coaches in the Super Bowl, Tony Dungy against Lovie Smith, which I think was 06, might have been the 07 Super Bowl.
Yeah, Super Bowl 3.
That's a while ago now. So if that had not happened, I think we'd be hearing a lot more about this for the Orange Bowl with this coaching matchup. And James said at the time there were 6 out of 120 some teams playing FBS football, and now there's, I think he said 16 or 17, something like that. So he said, well, I mean, that's not great, but it's progress. I think Freeman in particular, getting such a big boy marquee job at a relatively young age and a relatively, early in his career in terms of the resume. And apparently the players were so much in favor of hiring him that when he actually got hired, he might have been on kind of a short leash, but they showed some progress, I think, almost right away, and that has turned out to be a phenomenal hire. And again, the most important thing these guys do is recruit. Second most important thing they do is hire staff to help them recruit and help them develop. And he seems to have done it. They seem to be doing good on both of those things, which has not always been the case in the last 20, 25 years, post Lou Holtz, let's say.
I really like James's answer that he gave about hopefully it just opens up the door for opportunities for interviews for guys that have earned it. Yeah. And what James went on to say is, you earn the opportunity to get in there, and then you have to earn the opportunity to stay and to win your football games. And that's
not unique to African Americans. That's everybody's got to do that. Yeah.
That's what it comes down to. And James gave a really good answer right at the top of the press conference. And James has spoken often about it, and there's been multiple columns written about it. I think Rich has written about it in the past. I think Ben Jones has written about it a long time ago with James Franklin.
I've written about it too. But I also was on Freeman's press conference, and he said something similar to Franklin, but he was even more like, you know what, I'm just worried about my team right now. I'm worried about Notre Dame. But it does mean a lot to me. And he talked about some of the coaches, African-American and otherwise, who have been influential in his career. Actually, they're in substance what they said in response to the question was very similar.
As a kid, I'll never forget when Sylvester Croom actually got hired at Mississippi State.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
I remember that was a big one in the South.
He's 30 for 30. That turned into a 30 for 30. Yeah, that was interesting.
Former Alabama captain Sylvester Croom getting hired at Mississippi State. So time to pick the game. It's Penn State, Notre Dame. This is where the rubber meets the road. Do we know what we're talking about or not? All of us got to nail the Boise State game. I got a couple of text messages and emails last week. They're like, who picked 31-17, 31-14?
Yeah. Hey, I was just thinking about this the other day. I mean, I think I'm 15-0 this year. And a lot of times when all three of us pretty much had the game pegged. I mean, we didn't have the score exactly right, but essentially, I think we've done a hell of a job of predicting. I mean, so that's pretty small.
I think I have the worst record, but because I put them down,
maybe
to lose the USC, I had to score 100. Until Penn State scored the last touchdown and set into overtime, I had the score perfect.
Yeah, right.
I picked them to win before the season. I didn't think they were going to win Ohio State, just to defend my pick. I didn't think they were going to win against Ohio State the week of the game, but I picked them to beat Ohio State before the season. So I was riding my preseason prediction. So that's
well, that's a little different, but
yeah.
So I mean, I don't think anybody who is sensible can complain too much about the job we've done on that front. Yeah.
So I went before you last week, I believe. So I'm going to let you go first this week.
Okay, I'm going to pick Notre Dame. I think 23-20. I think it's going to be a fairly low-scoring game because I think both defenses are better than both offenses, and the limitations that we've talked about. I think it's a close enough matchup. I mean, if the opening line from Las Vegas is 1.5 or whatever it is, they're really just saying you pick who you think's going to win the game. And of course, they're two brand names, so there's not anything like that would affect the betting business that I would cancel out. So, it's a tough call. And again, if Drew Allar goes to the next level, whether he needs his receivers to help him get the lever, however that happens, Penn State can win. But I'm gonna go Notre Dame in a close one.
I've gone two totally different directions because I think Penn State has the talent and the athletic ability, especially of Abdul Carter, to really make life miserable for the offense and to get points off turnovers like a scoop and score.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking like, okay, that could happen. And Al Golden being so close to the Penn State job before James Franklin had it is going to try to do too much, and it's going to leave Notre Dame vulnerable. And Penn State's going to go through an open door, and I could see a 14-point Penn State victory. And then I talked to Frank, and Frank tells me, and then Frank had me going the opposite direction with a 14-point Notre Dame win after talking to him. Not that Frank has a 14-point win. I don't want to speak for Frank. Frank just was pointing out some things. I'm going the exact same score as you, Mike, but I'm going to be on the Penn State bandwagon because I just think that Vegas thing that you said, because Notre Dame's beating an SEC opponent and everybody in the nation is like, you gave Penn State that path? You have Penn State playing JV opponents? That's why I think they got that 1.5. Notre Dame's getting a little bit more than Penn State.
Well, yeah, I mean, they beat Georgia. You're right. That is the difference. Yeah, that's the difference in the way they're perceived. Yeah,
I do think they're getting a little bit more than that. And I don't think Georgia is as good as people think Georgia was. They're a team that, let's be honest, I don't think was going to make the college football playoff if a targeting penalty comes out against Georgia Tech.
Yeah, that's right.
They were lost.
That's a good point.
And maybe they go, maybe they're a third team in or another team in for the SEC at the tail end, and a fourth team got in. I don't know how that whole thing would have shaken out or the bracket. I'm not 100% sure. Maybe they would have been on the road at Penn State. I don't know. But
Georgia does have a defense, though, in my opinion.
They do.
Having seen them at their best this year, I think their defense is the lead. So is Penn State's. So is Notre Dame's. So is Texas's, I think. But anyway, so because they had such a good defense, so many athletes on that side of the ball, Notre Dame had to create some offense out of special teams. That second half kickoff, that was such a big game and play in that game. That was huge. And also, you know, that formula, we got to force turnovers. We got to make big plays in specialty. I'm not sure how reliable that formula is. That's one thing that kind of makes me a little hesitant about Notre Dame, because Penn State has a great defense too.
And hence, I think Drew Allar is going to be able to make a couple more throws, because I think he's trending up. We've talked about his maturity level. I know it feels a lot like a homer pick, but that's why I'm picking Penn State 23-20.
23-20, but we're on opposite sides.
Completely opposite way. That Penn State's going to be playing for the national championship game in Atlanta, I believe, against the Ohio State Buckeyes. And then I don't know what kind of 30 for 30 is going to come out if Penn State wins that game. I have no idea. The storylines are just
pretty epic, wouldn't it? That would be pretty epic.
Mount Kilauea is like going off in my head right now with the storylines that are coming out possibly of that game.
One more thought that I just had while you were talking there. James has said a lot of things. Several times this year, he has said something to the effect of, well, I have some things in mind that I'd like to say here, but I'm going to save them for another time. Maybe the other time is coming here. And he wants to say something about the big picture of everything that's happened at Penn State since he got the job in the post-Sandusky mess thing. I don't know that, but it'll be interesting to see if they win one of these two, and certainly if they win both of them, it'll be interesting to see what James comes up with afterward.
100%. I mean, there's this game. It's no matter how the game plays out, you have to appreciate it. This is what college football is all about. Yeah. The best thing.
A real playoff. It's a tournament. It's a real playoff. We're in the semis. Giddy up.
The best thing for each of these teams, Big Ten officials will not be on the game. Let's ask Arizona State and Texas about that. Specifically, Arizona State. You saw what Big Ten officials did in that one.
Where are they going to be from? You know,
I haven't looked for the list. I haven't seen it. I would assume they would be coming out of the SEC, or
the SEC was the SMU game.
Yeah, I would assume the SEC or the Big 12.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Just because we can't be the ACC. So just one real quick. I have a lot of appreciation for Bob Davey for how he always treated me the few times we met in my life. And my dad sat on a plane a couple times with Lou Holtz, so I just wanted to shout that out. Lou Holtz signed a bunch of stuff for the people in my hometown, so just wanted to always do that. So for this edition of the Blue White Tailgate Podcast, Penn State, Notre Dame, just enjoy the game. If you're a fan of either team, you got to love it. Blue and white, gold and green, and blue. Gotta love it. Enjoy it. It's the Orange Bowl. May the best team win. Have a good one.
See ya.